Okay, looks like we are on the show. Let's get our little clickety-clack intro opening. Welcome to Evolution Hour here on the 28th of October, 24, towards the election. Although we do things smoothly in Washington State, don't forget our cute little website to draw on. In fact, we will be citing something from that website this very show. So, as you well know, we are slogging along through Titans. We are going through their little sparse section on hadrosaurs. And the other half of the show is the 13th installment, Spooky for Halloween, episode of the Luskin show. We'll be dealing with all of that. There was a wonderful conference here in Spokane just over the weekend with Andrew Seidel and Brad Onishi, who came into town with a conference on combating Christian nationalism. I'm going to be writing up a post on that for our Spokane Faves news service here, and I will be putting a link up to that on Twitter, and I'll probably put a link up to it once it's finalized on whatever next show pops up. I can put a link in on that as well. So that way we can kind of get caught up on all of that. I had put up earlier posts at Faves on the analytical work that I had done on the interconnections between the Council for National Policy and Project 2025 and the Trump administration and Christian nationalists and political leaders and creationists for that matter. Anyway, that's all part of that little funky doodle. Donald Trump on the political side was conducting his Madison Square America First 1940 Conclave 2024 edition. I must say the Trump speeches and the various people that were there, it was so much richer in the original German from Hitler's time. But and we had a comedian who was going on about deliberately, I think, trying to blow to smithereens any chances Trump could have to win the Puerto Rican vote. And Mr. Giggles, Tucker Carlson was up there. Dr. Phil was speaking there. Well, so much for whatever reputation he had. Okie doke. Anyhow, interesting circumstance. I'm sure this is going to be discussed by the various pundits and stuff on the late night shows tomorrow. See how Colbert and Seth Meyers and all the other gang go into it, because my gosh, there was some fascinating stuff there. Woo! Anyhow, back to our little show and the comparatively benign world of iguanodons. Iguanodons are large, bigger than elephant size, herbivores, somewhat bipedal, although they will plop down on their front feet. They were one of the first dinosaurs that were found, and our little guys at in Sarfati and Tay are not really offering much detail. They got a little bit on the history of it, not a single technical source in sight, not even a creationist source in sight, but repeating mythologies about it. And particularly the cataclysmic water burial of the Bernissart iguanodons. Now, I was familiar with all of this stuff going back way long, because this one had been a trope that was been up in Henry Morris, and more secondarily in Richard Milton, relying on Henry Morris, namely that you had this crevasse where the iguanodons were being swept in a cataclysm, which could only be the flood. Now, Sarfati and Tay don't get very close to this issue. They but claim that later paleontologists proposed several separate burials. Again, no sources, which they attribute to the advancing and retreating floodwaters. So I'm going to be putting a link up to the posting that I did of the old chapter 3 of earlier iterations of the thing, the Dynamania chapter. And you can zip on down to page 209 to find out what I'm referring to on there. But I shall read you a little passage, a quote from David Norman's 1985 Dino Encyclopedia. Norman happens to be the world authority on iguanodons. And so, and the irony is that Milton, dear old Richard Milton from 1997, channeling Henry Morris, He could have known about the information that I'm about to read to you because he cited Norman's encyclopedia on other matters. So he had to have known about it, assuming, of course, he was diligent and was actually reading through its content and connecting up dots. Probably not. Anyhow, Norman had this to say about the Bernissart iguanodons. One rather misleading aspect of the way of life of iguanodon relates to the discoveries at Bernissart. The concentration of skeletons at Bernissart have been used as evidence that these animals lived in herds, and in the case of Bernissart, that they plunged into a ravine after being stampeded by a predator or some other dramatic event. Unfortunately, appealing through though the story is, it is certainly not what happened at Bernissart. Restudy of the material has shown that there was no ravine to fall into. The skeleton simply collected in a marshy or lake-like depression. Furthermore, there was no large herd, but rather there were separate phases of deposition with carcasses being washed in and buried from time to time. Perfectly natural, perfectly not cataclysmic. It would have been fun to have seen Sarfati and Tay try to cite something on this topic to kind of get an idea of what the source material was. But we don't even get that far. So all they're doing is kind of ricocheting, presumably off of Henry Morris and the like, from decades after the fact. Because they don't offer any source material, and we've alluded to ornithopod systematics and stuff in some of the papers in previous episodes, I found a cute little item from Nature Communications from just this year, Trophic Evolution in Ornithopod Dinosaurs Revealed by Dental Wear, which goes into all the little fun and games about how the teeth structures and wear patterns and the like have been going on within that bunch. And their relations, and how it's telling us about their habitat, their particular eating preferences, the issue about what exactly did iguanodons eat, what kind of plants were available and all that sort of sidebar stuff. That, of course, is to be contrasted with the vacuous nothing that we're continuing to get in Sarfati and Tay's book. Yipes. Next week, spoiler alert, which will be about those cute little small critters, this Lyosaurus that I alluded to a couple of weeks back, looking at the overall point where, oh boy, there's some fun technical papers on that little stuff. And it's the first one that they're actually citing some source material on, kind of, sort of around the corner. But it turns out, there's a lot of stuff that we're going to be having on that. Anyhow, that'll have to wait for next week. So on to the next installment of Luskin. No surprise, we're still not getting any technical papers that are supporting their primary argument that a majority, 50% above, of these various retrotransposons and non-coding DNA, non-functional stuff is actually functional. And all we're doing is simply repeating the tropes that there are little teeny niches, which Dan Stern Cardinale and other people have commented on this, have not denied that there are segments of retrotransposons that take on functionality and become inveigled in the system. You got millions of the bloody things. So you can have thousands, even tens of thousands, that actually are becoming useful in some way. That's not an indication that all of them are. And none of the papers are explicitly saying this. Instead, we bump into some interesting material because there was Ling Ling Chen that we encountered back on Evolution Hour 331. So it's been a little ways back. And it turns out that author pops up on a whole bunch of stuff that shows up on the list. And I was encountering this material, and I did a little text search of the file to try to see what was going on. And I go, oh, yeah, he's actually riffing off of a chunk of things. And they're spread over quite a long time. And we can start with Chen and Carmichael from 2008, which is describing the early stage of identifying these ALU connections. This paper, incidentally, also shows up peripherally dangled in a 2024 post by Jeffrey Tompkins. And I'll be putting a link up to that so you can see how nothing much of use is popping up in Tompkins. Anyway, we get the same kind of a problem from Chen et al. 2008, which is on that linkage thing that we previously noted about how ALUs can cross-connect and form linkages that way, and sometimes good, sometimes bad. And Chen and Carmichael from 2009. And then there's a Zheng et al. 2014, which is specifically on ALUs spawning these multiple circular RNA transcripts from a single gene. And then Hu et al. 2015 on the part that the CARM1 enzyme plays. Curiously, whenever a terminology pops up in this area, I then do a source check, text check, to find out any other papers are discussing that on the list. Turns out this time nothing. In a few other cases previous weeks, if you looked up a particular topic, the little subsection, the gene involved, there's some other papers that they've slipped in on the subject, which they're misrepresenting as well, as we've noted. But curiously, nothing on CARM1. Maybe because this thing plays a role in cancers. And it's been noted along the way by a 2023 paper by Santos et al. That I'll be putting the link up to, and it's not on the Luskin list. Oh, hi, Vesta. And then there's Zhang et al. 2018 on more details on how adenosine gets converted to inosine in RNA editing. And so it's like a detailed mechanism thing of the process of RNA editing, not in fact, watching on my new, 72-inch flat screen TV. Holy smokes, that's a broom filler. My wee little 55-inch is overshadowed. Of course, I can remember back, and I'm sure you probably can too, when the first time we got our 21-inch color television set back in the 1960s, and then could upgrade to 25-inch, and then 31-inch, and then finally even 35-inch, by the which time you had CRT things that were so heavy that it took 2 or 3 people to maneuver them around because they were so monolithically expensive. Whereas that 55-inch set, I was able to physically pick it up by myself and move it onto the spot that it was going. So it's just amazing how flat screen technology and all that works. The processing systems and all that that you can get, a lot of these are 4K, and they have internet connections, and there's all sorts of wonderful bits on the stuff. So it's a delightful thing. And anything that you see with Blu-rays and the like, you can just get some absolutely gobsmacking image on that. And a lot of the newer Blu-rays and that are in 4K. Greetings. Hello, Purple. Yeah, so the ongoing thing with Luskin is just a constant refrain. This one, because they didn't bump into that sidebar material on the CARM1, none of these papers directly trigger off that theodicy angle, but they're still running a relatively high proportion, like a third, that are bumping into that little category. And of course, only that one little lonely paper way back early in the series that was the closest anything has got to be a text that you could interpret as thinking that there was a possibility that most of the junk DNA could be functional. And it's not gone anywhere since then. You'll learn a hell of a lot about an awful lot of topics. They're just fascinating little papers about the ins and outs and mechanisms of things, and they're going into the epidemiology of stuff and the mechanisms of how they detect material. It's an absolute cornucopia of science information that pops up in these various technical papers. And what's revealing so much about that, I'm wondering, well, what are the TVs be displaying more color and resolution than the average human can see? Well, that's an intriguing little point. There's we can perceive a hell of a lot. Some of this stuff relates to depth of field and that, rather, which is why, oh, hi, Ian. My gosh, I still have to watch your debate with Kent Hovind. It's on my little to watch list. So bear in mind, yes, Ian has delighted in being the thin-skinned nincompoop Hovind in the previous debate and stuff that he did, and from 2023. And I'm expecting no less from you this time. It's going to be a lot of fun. I've been having a lot of stuff stacked up on. There was an analysis by Josh Bowen and Kip Davis, in a humongous 2-hour and 20-minute discussion of some biblical apologetic stuff that was popping up that I needed to go through in relation to stuff that's going to be eventually in the religion book and all of that. So it's a juggling act of material to go on to. Anyhow, so all that stuff that we're getting from, oh yes, you were talking about the pixel issue. When you've got the eyeball can perceive a hell of a lot. Probably the most amazing item to get if you want to have a show-off video to view on your 72-inch television set would be How the West Was Won, and view it in the smile box format. Because Cinerama was done in with a single lens that matched the curvature of the human eye. So it has the most amazing depth of field of any film process that's ever existed. And you don't get that level. You get close to it in some details when you're dealing with 70 millimeter film processes and some of the ones that have used, like the one for Patton and stuff like that. But there's very little of that even used. You can get that to some extent with 70 millimeter IMAX and all that. Anyway, all of that stuff in Blu-ray will just be gobsmackingly gorgeous on that front. And plus you get, it's great for like just even running at wimpy little 700 level that an awful lot of broadcast channels do rather than full 1040. It's still enough that it makes nature programs and science programs just absolutely delish. So it's wonderful to deal with. Oh yeah. Hoping told me at the beginning of the debate oh yes, let me so. Oh yeah, little whiny puss. That if I used an ad hom the debate, I told him to grow a pair. I knew he wouldn't leave the debate. He's too prideful for that. Yeah, that sounds like him now. And I mean, for somebody who has been as snotty and arrogant and overconfident as he is, good God. Well, remember, I describe Hovind as the Donald Trump of creationism, or Donald Trump is the Kent Hovind of politics. They're an isomorphism going either way. These are people who crave the attention, and they have an incredibly inflated sense of themselves. They imagine themselves to be infallible. I've never known Kent Hovind ever to admit he made an error on anything, just as Donald Trump doesn't. And of course, Ian just loves the contact sport aspect of the debate thing. I can be a little bit testy too, although I bow to Ian's proficiency. You just dive in on a level that's absolutely astonishing. Wow. I think that there's various approaches to these things, and then you have the scholarly focal point detail approach that you get with, like, say, Dan Stern Cardinale in Erica's interactions with creationists. I don't think I can't recall whether she's ever debated Kent Hovind or not. But at any rate, her various interactions standing for truth and all these other kinds. Erica just drips such gentility and niceness about it, which I can't pull off. I'm an old fart, so I don't have that aspect in there. I've tried not to lose my temper in debates, which I can occasionally. In an instance where I was bumping into Nephilim Free, holy moly, that guy just got that. Young at heart, indeed. Well, and that's one of the important things to deal with. Any of us who are gray-haired level, nonetheless, are really anxious to live more into the century, because we're anxious to see things. I want to see manned expeditions on Mars. I think we can talk Elon Musk to relocating there and just staying on Mars. You think that they might be able to pull that one off? I don't know. We'll see about that. But and probes, I want to see what the missions to Europa, and see if we can find out what the heck is going on in their little oceans. There's just a hell of a lot of amazing science that I want to live as long as possible to see. And hopefully with the election, I've already mailed in my ballot, so I'm committed on one way or the other. I'm assuming Washington State will go, like the whole West Coast states will be going for Harris. And so there's a certain anticlimactic thing. We'll know by the roughly about the time that the polls are closing on the West Coast, an awful lot about the election will have already been settled. And so it's going to be interesting to see what's been going on in the East. Some of the states that the last time had gone for Trump, like Florida has a relatively rapid counting system. It's not as clunky. Some of the states are stupid and have things where you can't even open the ballots up to start pre-sorting them until the polls are closed, which is just dumb. Some other states, however, are rational, and that they allow you to open because if they've got ballots, drop-off ballots like Washington State does, where you have a security envelope inside of a larger envelope. And so all you have to do is confirm the signature on the outside, and then you can open up the thing but not count them, but just simply collate them and organize them so you have a whole stack of legitimate ballots. Then you can just feed them into the machine once the actual counting process goes, and that speeds things up. Fortunately, even the Trumpish courts have put the kibosh on some of these plans, but in Georgia to put like that they have to manually count all of the votes to confirm them, that was a late move that was just plain stupid. That won't have to worry about that. So anyway, don't have enough life left to be liked. Yes. Well, I want to keep up. I have far too many Phileas Fogg novels left to do. And I'm reasonably confident that we'll be able to get virtually all of the books that Jackson and I are planning on doing after we get finished with volume 2, which should be out next year. We're zipping along pretty busy. I'll be diving into the big cosmology chapter. I've got all the source material on that. I got all the material plugged in that's going to be relating to the human evolution stuff. Jackson will be actually doing the scaffolding of all of that, and then I'll be able to sort out what little side technical issues that I have from the various material I've accumulated. Let's see. Yes, things. It's just a further interest. Yeah, exactly that. And the other area, I think it unlikely that the Democrats can take Ohio, but not impossible. Florida, by contrast, is actually potentially doable. If you think about disaffected Trump voters and young people and women who are concerned about reproductive rights and new voters coming on field, because there's about nationally, there's like 8 million new Gen Z people in the mix. Trump only won Florida by about 280,000 votes, 380,000 votes, and out of like 15 million. And so a shift of 500,000 votes coming onto the field could theoretically flip the state back to Democrat, as it was under Obama. Obama took Florida in both 2008 and 2012. So we'll be wanting to see about all of that and finding out how the electoral vote goes. And there's a lot of stuff. Plus, it's curious to see. Yes, some idiot insulted Puerto Rico. Yes, this comedian, he's apparently a right-wing podcaster guy. I'd never heard of him before. And seeing his shtick makes me happy that I had not heard of him before. Anyway, he was making a lot of nasty jokes, and he was saying about how, did you know that there is a giant floating pile of garbage out in the Atlantic Ocean? It's called Puerto Rico. And it was just on this over and over again. As I said, Tucker Carlson spoke there. You had Rudy Giuliani, who got a big, rousing ovation. It reminds me so much of the extremist crap that if you study the bits that were going on in the America First Nazi bunch in Madison Square Garden back in 1940. Wow, this is bringing up memories. Trump, for his part, as far as I could see from the speeches he was doing, he was just basically repeating the same shtick. He's not original. And he's just, he does the little accordion when he goes into the wiggle waggle mode, but there's nothing much new from him. Vance spoke, and the two kids, they were telling us, little Don and all that, how wonderful things were. And it shows that it's just kind of like an oligarch club party now. And when you look at the number of Republicans, including people from the Trump administration that are on the Harris side of the fence, that shows you that this is not the Republican Party. It's Trumpista Party. And I refuse to call it Republican Party. It's just plain blah. So all the stuff that needs to be done to make a better future and a more technologically sophisticated future, we're have a chance of getting that if we can get more progressives and people with scientific literacy and that in there. considering what Trump said about PR, and there's 1.1 million people. Yeah. Oh, yes. That's another factor. And another matter that's the number of people in Florida. There's like 500,000 Haitians living in Florida. And needless to say, they are probably not all thrilled at the libels that have been thrown around them, which there's been no apologies from anybody in the Trumpista camp. They're just doubling down on it or wiffle waffling and jumping to something else. Every time a Trumpista is asked whether Trump won the 2020 election, they all just go, oh, they changed the subject or flit on about, well, we had concerns about the election. Well, but your concerns are head up your ass wrong. I mean, that doesn't mean a damn thing. It's a joke. I reply, it's not a joke. What's wrong with you? Indeed, yeah. The nastiness and the evasions that are going on in the Trumpistas is a very disreputable circumstance. And I'm hoping that we can, through the first hurdle. Whoops. I suddenly got a little side blip where my screen burped. Come on. I do not want a stupid McAfee ad, and the little X won't disappear. There we go. Whoop. Anyway, it's a very tumultuous time we're dealing with. And even just from a rationalist point of view, that is an interesting prospect. Yeah, well, and in certain districts, it's not at all sure that Cruz is going to survive. Oh, I hope he gets thrown out. And also Josh Hawley seems to be in a tight race in there. So it's complex mix. And there's a lot of analytics will be able to see just how accurate or inaccurate a lot of the polling data was that is showing this is kind of tight. And whether they're overcompensating and misunderstanding things and to see how much people actually end up voting. So it's going to be an intriguing thing. My best case scenario would be, of course, that Harris gets her 270 with wide margin to spare. How many states we can flip beyond that. But in terms of overall vote, I don't think it's at all implausible that Harris could pull 90 million on the whole popular vote. And I think it's not at all impossible that Trump will get well below his 75 million of 2020 and might even be closer to the 65 million that he got in 2016. If he does worse than that, then that would be a serious indicator that some of the MAGA fever has broken and that they are really losing their grip. And if there's enough voting where the Congress becomes Democratic again and they fail to take the Senate, and there's a variety of state houses and others that start failing, then that can change a lot. I will not be surprised, however, if, say, Marjorie Taylor Greene wins re-election in Georgia, because apparently her district is crazy train conservative. And so she could very well end up over the years and years and years being the last Republican in Congress. I could see her as this desiccated old bat, still being elected over and over and over again in her little Georgia district. And she's not paying nobody's paying attention to her because her party has disappeared around her. We'll find out. That's what I'm hoping for. It's partly about the fact that they're asking about likely voters and to what extent they're really getting a grip on who's linking up in terms of what their source base is. That bothers the heck out of me. A lot of in-depth analysis at NPR and various media that are trying to work out what people think, but and a little bit about why, but they're not really inquiring too much about their source field. And you've got even a breakdown as to how many of them are watching Fox Trump Pravda or Newsmax versus people that are watching the regular media. That can be misleading because you need to break it down even more. People who would be regularly watching the news on a affiliate that's owned by Sinclair will be getting a pile of little slip through the radar propaganda that may be tempering their views on a lot of things. I think that might account for why Trump has an undeserved reputation about economic issues as well as immigration policy. it'll be an interesting bit to go on. In early in November, my co-author Jackson Wheat is getting married, and I have been invited to the wedding, and I'm going to be flying off then. It should theoretically not interfere with the Evolution Hour thing, because I'll be back in Seattle, and then I'll be able to do the show, and then driving back to Spokane and that hit up for the next one. But we'll cross fingers on that. If it turns out the scheduling or weirdness happens, or door falls off the plane or something like that, we'll be crossing our fingers until we can actually get to and from all of that. It's a funky little time. So let me put up my little advert for of course, yes. I need to thank our patrons. This is an important thing that I never want to forget, how much I am honored by everybody, our colleagues and researchers and assistant researcher levels and friends, as well as the legacy patrons that have helped us in one way or another over the years, and even a few on the list who have passed on in the years that have gone by. I've been doing this little show for quite a while now. We remember we're in the 300s on a weekly show. That's a lot. And I'm keeping at it. I want to keep the premise up that anybody that does videos should be able to do at least what I do, which is if you're discussing science topics or historical topics or political topics or whatever, try to provide full text linkages so that nobody has to take your word for it. I think that as a general principle is extremely important. They can be done in various ways. I mean, Nick Zentner doesn't, he's at my level of tech savvy in many respects. And so, but they will show papers. You'll physically show the image of them on the screen, just like I did. Hasn't got to the point of putting in linkages, at least for some of the kinds of stuff that would be more technical conversations. Some of the things are kind of live chat material, but all of his papers typically are available because he has a website where all the technical literature is up PDF, so anybody can download them. So that's a way around it. So there's various ways that you can go about doing it. But the mere talking head pundit who just puts out the viewpoint and alludes to science material but doesn't actually get you enough information so that you can find it, I think there's no excuse for that. If I can do it, anybody can, and anybody should. So we want to make information flow as easy as possible so that everybody can follow up on the linkages and move things on in their own way. That's how that all works. Yeah, there's a great deal of issue about people who felt very disaffected, who felt that the system wasn't working for them, and in many respects it wasn't working for them. But there is a level of energy and enthusiasm that I can see in the Harris campaign that I'm not seeing over in Trumplandia. It's not that he doesn't have cheering crowds, but they're smaller, although he did manage to fill the bloody Madison Square Garden. I'd be intrigued to know who's paying for it. Is Musk signing the bills or whatever? Because I don't think Trump is paying a dime on any of his processes, and they still owe a couple $1 million, including to Spokane, for stiffing people on venues and security payments and all the rest. So they're a deadbeat bunch. They're like Alex Jones, a pretty sleazy little bunch. For you historical buffs, it should be pointed out that the Madison Square Garden today is not in the same location as the one that the America First was held in 1940. That old Madison Square Garden was demolished years ago, and I'm not sure what the hell has been built on the site, but they moved uptown to a bigger venue in the 1920s, early 30s, and then has been rebuilt and adjusted since, I think, on the same site. And perfectly fine facility, but nevertheless, I think everybody that is associated with that Madison Square meet is either going to be too ideologically clueless to be realizing that this is not doing their reputation any good, or realizing too late that it ain't helping their reputation. I think the only person who might be thought of as kind of mainstream who really should have thought this over is Dr. Phil. This was a dumb move to him appearing on that stage because it's not going to look good on the resume. Anyway, it's going to be interesting to see because all of the young people that need to vote, we're making the future for them. Decisions that are being made now are going to be casting the paths for decades, and we still have to maneuver around the stupid Trumpista courts. Somebody posted on Twitter, I think yesterday, a little selection from the old law show that fellow that was on Blacklist was when he was on that series with William Shatner. And it was from like 2007, long time ago. But they were talking about the Supreme Court and Roberts and Justice Thomas and all that, and the hyper-conservative rulings that they were making. And I'm going, whoa, that's nailing it. And that's before Trump put even more people onto the court. So this was a remarkably prescient and insightful description of how politicized that Leonard Leo style court has been, that Federalist Society tempered extremist court has been, that feigns impartiality. As Andrew Seidel said when he was doing his speech here in Spokane, he says, you don't spend $500 million to get impartial judges. You're spending $500 million to get partial judges that are going to be favoring your ideological perspective. So it's an exciting world we're living in because they're going to be on the court for a long time and screwing things up. Yes, I think there's a very good chance of Democrats winning majorities in both houses. And I'll be intrigued to see here whether or not we can dislodge the Republicans from Kathy McMorris Rodgers' seat, although it's a fairly conservative district, but we do have an awful lot of college people in here that would have a different skew. But if the Republican Baumgartner, who seems to be just as wiffle-waffly on election fraud and all that, and vague on environmental policy and all that, if he could manage to not win, that would be an interesting maneuver. And if there's more of a blue wave on a significant scale, that's going to cause the little remnants of people who have functioning brain stems over on the Republican side to realize that this MAGA movement is just disintegrating the party. It's dooming them to a political extinction. They're going to end up like the Whigs or the Know Nothing Party. Has anybody ever deserved the title Know Nothing Party more than the current Trumpistas? I think they've outdone the original Know Nothing Party. Yes, that there's been quite a few people who have been taking note of the amount of open Harris support in a lot of these little retirement communities and that in Florida and in other places, and that this is an indication that there's an awful lot of groundswell on that going on. It's going to be a very revealing election one way or the other, and the Harris campaign has enough money and abilities to be able to just keep things pounding right down to the last minute when they have to stop that on the weekend before the election, I think. So I am cautiously optimistic that the glass ceiling will be broken and Harris will become the first woman president come January, and that things will not look good overall, just as 2022 didn't look all that good overall, when all the normal dynamics would have suggested that the Democrats should have lost disastrously in the congressional midterms, when they didn't. And yeah, they lost some. They lost control of the House. And there's an upside to the fact that having idiot Speaker Johnson in there, our creationist conspiracy guy, has reminded people of why these people can't be in charge and how Looney Tunes all of this stuff. There's those endless dumb committee things that Comer does, going after the laptop and all of this other stuff, where he's constantly promising bombshells and not even getting a fizzle. They can't even manage a lit fuse. And it reminds us why, no, we need to have governance that tries to get stuff done and successfully get stuff done as much as possible. And that the Trumpistas are just in the way. They're not helping at all. In Georgia, 80% of the registered voters have already turned in their ballots. Yeah, it's interesting. There is an upsurge apparently in some Republican pre-voting, but there's some indication also that a lot of those are women, and that there's very great possibility that an awful lot of Republican women who had voted for Trump before may not be doing that the second time around. And so there'll be a lot of analysis on this stuff. So it's going to make Tuesday, election day, an interesting and exciting one. Anyway, I've filled in all my ballot and it's all dropped off at the drop box, all taken care of, and I don't have to worry about that. We don't even, we have all mail-in voting here in Washington State. Utah, I think, is like that. And I think there are a couple other states that are functionally like that. These clunky hybrids that have some mail-in voting but it's still largely at physical polling places. God, that's inconvenient. Whereas the approach I can do, if I feel like walking up to the drop box and drop it off on a nice little stroll late at night, which is my want when I'm dropping off mail at the post office and going the other direction, it's easy peasy convenient. And weather typically isn't too bad in November, but still in some areas it can be mucky indeed. The abortion bans and all that. They're trying to put a spin on it that, that's not really a concern for people. But no, it's a ginormous concern for people. And anybody it's a simple bit of logic. Anybody who thinks that the Dobbs decision was screwball wrong, that means you must never have a Republican, Federalist Society type MAGA people as president ever again, because they're the ones that pick court nominees. And you need to make sure that the Senate never gets to be that way either, because they're the ones that confirm them. It's a simple logic. And then the same thing is if you want budgets to be passed and things to be done that actually are meaningful in whatever, if you have any chance at all, it means you got to have people with functioning brain stems. And the degree to which the Trumpista party has been taken over by screwballs to where they can just go into paralyzation mode and not do a damn thing, or go Jawohl, mein Kommandant when Trump tells them to sink the immigration bill. This isn't governance. This is stalling. These are people that don't like governing, and they are showing that they don't want anybody else to do any governing either, unless I'll hold my breath until I go turn blue. I want only what I want. So, Mitch McConnell is enormously influential. And the fact that he's still voting for Trump, there's the lower circle of hell politically. For me, are the Mitch McConnells and the Lindsey Graham. My God, Lindsey Graham, what a whiny little toady and a craven hypocrite that fellow is. Kevin McCarthy fell into that as well. The Republican Party lost its soul the moment after January 6th, when they should have just banned Trump from the party, expelled him, pooled their political capital and done that. And they had a little tiny flash moment where it looked like they might be doing that. But nope. And they turned around and now they're climbing onto the train. And the same thing with like Nikki Haley, who decides to end up endorsing Trump anyway. This is people so blinded by political ambition and so prone to overlook the excesses of their own side that they are shredding any connection between it and the Republican Party that I knew when I was growing up, let alone the historic party of Teddy Roosevelt and Lincoln and all that. My God, Robert Ingersoll, our great freethinker, Civil War general who nominated James G. Blaine, the Plume Knight, in 1884, I think. Boy, it's a long time and a sad fate that if there is a heaven and Lincoln is up in there, he should be cursing all of these Trumpistas to some fates worse than death. So we'll see what happens in this little world. We've got a whole pretty good show on there. Let me put my advert up for Rocks Were There. Come. There you go. And put the share screen again. I can guarantee you that Rocks Were There Volume 2 is going to be even more kick butt than Rocks Were There Volume 1. And as shameless plug, I can point out that people as disparate as Dapper Dino and Dan Stern Cardinale and Vice Rhino all have the rocks were there and are delighted by it and use it as reference point and track down material in it. The one thing that I learned in the first two books that I realized I needed to correct is the fact that the info boxes that we innovated for the Rocks Were There Volume 1, those things don't paginate properly in the ebook version. So I'll be doing two versions, one that's tailored for the ebook where all of that stuff, information in an info box will be kept together and all of that material to go up and transform how I'll be doing the indexing and that to make that make sense for the ebook version as opposed to the format that's relatively the print version is the easiest to do, frankly, because it's just the PDF version of the master word processor, and it maps page by page much more easily. But the ebook operates on a different dynamic, and it's a learning curve. So I'm an old fart. It takes me a while to get all this done, and be able to hold even heavier doors. Well, I have to say. Volume 1 is as big as you can get for print. And so it's likely to be as big physically as the other. You can't get much larger as a print thing through the Amazon Create Space thing. I had to trim the font size down on the page, the bibliography and the index and that to pull us back and up because the original draft of the thing meant that it was shooting past the page limit for publication. So I had to shrink. That's why the little typeface is remarkably small for the reference base on it, which is, after all, 100 some odd pages in small print. There's a lot of sources in there. And the intervening time between the first book and this one, there's been an awful lot of science work in addition to just a wonderful mass of creationist twaddle that all of the current issues of ICR's Acts and Facts have been collated so that they will be alluded to where relevant in the new book. And there's a lot of stuff going on in there. So anyway, we're busy. We're keeping go on here. And everybody stay really safe. Everybody vote. Boy, does it matter. Remember to do the bad carpenter and hit a thumb. Yeah. And watch out for the wooden penguins. Everybody stay safe. There's starting to get big rainstorms and stuff along our west coast. Drought in the east. I mean, everything is wackaloon. That's why, I can't even plan weather circumstances well in advance. I don't know what the hell the weather is going to be like when I'm making the trip for Jackson's wedding, but we'll see what the heck is going on. Anyway, we will see you all kids next week, and everybody stay safe and enjoy your time and learn, because my gosh, we're in a wonderful world for knowledge, and I don't want anybody in the political realm to slow that process down.